Tyler Guyton is set to be the Cowboys' Week 1 starter at left tackle. How did he perform in his first preseason game? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we're going to review some of our All-22 notes from the Cowboys' first preseason game. We'll talk about DeMarvion Overshown, Marquise Bell, Asim Richards, some Cooper Beebe talk, of course, because this is a Locked On Cowboys podcast. But let's start with some big news out of Dallas. Chuma Edoga, who has been practicing a lot as the Cowboys' first team starting left tackle, has a foot injury, a toe injury that's going to cause him to miss several weeks into the regular season, according to Todd Archer. So, of course, Landon, that means training wheels are coming off for Tyler Guyton. Let's get right into that. First of all, what did you think of Edoga's injury? And is Guyton ready to be a starting left tackle in the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. First off, after the injury was announced in the game, post-game, rewatching the tape and then very much noticing Edoga's injury. It was very clear where it happened on what play, and that he fell onto his foot, and it looks like it's just his foot kind of turned in a weird way. And I thought that Edoga had actually had some pretty good snaps coming into that game, or playing in that game, especially early on. So I thought that it was some positive things he put on tape, but obviously, the training wheels are off. And the good news for the Cowboys fans is that Nick Eatman, pretty much before the game had tweeted out that he had heard from coaches that it was basically decided that Guyton was going to be your Week 1 starter. So I think if anything, that just kind of shows you that this was earned. Like this wasn't just handed to him because of the Edoga injury. The Edoga injury is obviously unfortunate and obviously kind of truly makes that official because he's not going to be available Week 1. But this was a decision that was made based on merit for the way Guyton had played in training camp and in the offseason, and based on what they've seen on his play. So the positive news here is that Guyton has earned his starting spot as a left tackle. But yes, obviously the fallback plan, the backstop of having Edoga there is no longer there, right?
As of right now.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing I wanted to talk to you about before we get into Tyler Guyton stuff. It remains unclear how long he's going to be out. Yeah. I saw a report this morning. It's a broken toe, 4 to 6 weeks. And again, the 4 weeks even pushes you into the regular season. 6 weeks, you're talking about Week 3, Week 4. I thought from Todd Archer's tweet that it might be longer than that. David Moore also said it's a significant foot injury.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how the Cowboys handle this. Do you think they put him on the IR list, which they could put him on the IR and bring him back, but you can only do 2 of those before the season starts? Do you think they just put him on IR where he's lost for the season? Do they carry him on the 53-man roster because they know he might be back in Week 2, Week 3? What do you think happens here?
Well, I think what's interesting is what are they going to do with him immediately, right? Because I think that you can put him on a couple of different roster, mechanisms once we get closer to the regular season. But I think that there's going to be a question as to exactly how do you handle him immediately without potentially putting him on a list that ends his season, right?
Because I don't think you want to do that unless, and we're going to talk about this at the end of the show, unless one of the other tackles kind of steps up. But I also don't know if you want to have like rookie left tackle, second year swing tackle behind him.
Well, listen, I'm on board. Like, but burn the boats, as they say. I'm on board with Asim Richards being the backup swing.
We'll get to him, so save your thoughts on him.
I'm certainly excited about him, but I agree. Like, I think you don't throw away the opportunity to have a veteran offensive tackle who's not terrible, So I think that you find a way to keep him on the roster. He still could be a very valuable piece. I mean, injuries happen, right? Like just like his injury happened. So I think you certainly find a way or some sort of roster mechanism to keep him on as long as you can, just in case something goes wrong. Because ultimately, look, is it a good thing for Guyton that he's getting this opportunity? Yes, but also it would be great to have some sort of insurance in case things don't go
here.
well. Yeah, and I don't know that Asim Richards, as fantastic as I think he played, is necessarily ready for that week one against the Browns. So I think finding a, and not that Edoga is not going to be ready either, but the point being that I think it's better to have more players who are competent at the position in a backup situation, especially on the offensive line, than not. So definitely try to find a way to keep him on the team.
All right, let's talk about how Guyton performed in his first preseason action. I mean, the first thing I can tell you, Landon, like it's clear that he wasn't 100%. And I think I saw it on the tape, like his second drive the first drive that he had coming out of halftime, you could just see by the end of that drive, he just had nothing left. And I mean, that's probably just because he's had an illness, right? Like anybody who's been sick for a week knows that you just have no energy, right? And you have no stamina. But Tyler Guyton's numbers overall from Pro Football Focus were absolutely outstanding. 21 offensive snaps, 13 pass block snaps, 0 hits allowed, 0 hurries allowed, 0 pressures allowed, graded out as the highest graded tackle among all the rookies in week one. Again, very limited sample size, but I do think he looked pretty good from what we saw.
Yeah, I mean, I think, in the allotted snaps that he was supposed to be playing in, right? He especially looked very good, right? In that first grouping of snaps, he looked ready. He looked, physically dominant. He was moving bodies. I mean, it was not even, he was finishing guys onto the ground. It was in the pass protection and in the run game. You saw him moving people. I thought that first group, he looked, that's the Tyler Guyton we've been seeing in practice. When he came back in a little bit later, as you said, like as things kind of started to go on a little bit into the game, you could tell he was getting tired, right? And that it was kind of, he was exhausted after having been, pretty sick for the previous week, that it started to wear on him a little bit. So I think, obviously he had to go into the game because of the Edoga injury and certainly played probably, I would guess, twice the amount of snaps that he probably was allotted originally. If I'm just putting a number out there. So the fact that he was able to kind of go out there at all on short notice after being sick is a great sign. The fact that even when he was tired, he didn't play terribly. He just, you could tell a difference between
he just wasn't finishing off the blocks the way he was in the first half.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's all very positive sign. And again, it's telling that, and I hate to throw your guy under the bus, but it's telling that it was Waletzko that needed to get the IV at halftime, and Guyton was able to kind of get through that whole game. Yeah, well, we don't need to talk about Waletzko because let's keep this positive. But I think it was a situation where he did play more than he expected. It was probably pretty exhausting for him, but he got through and he performed well from start to finish, and that's obviously very encouraging.
Yeah, very encouraged by what we saw from Tyler Guyton. I've got to imagine we're going to see him a lot on Saturday when the Cowboys have their next preseason game against the Raiders, because they're going to want to get him as many reps as possible to get him ready for week one. They also have to get his conditioning up. So what do we think? Maybe the entire first half for Tyler Guyton?
I mean, he played 21 snaps, in this game. I imagine you could probably see it bumped up to 35. Yeah, like 40 snaps maybe. I think that's probably, yeah. I mean, well, first of all, he needs to get healthy and like get his wind back immediately. That part's got to get done quickly. And then he's going to need every single rep he can get.Maybe he'll get lucky and the Raiders will put out their first defensive line for plan. Snaps. Yeah, so that would be really beneficial for him to get some opportunities to get a couple of really good pass rushers, guys who could give them some sort of facsimile of what Garrett is going to be like on week one. So that'll be good for Guyton.
And the good thing for the Raiders is they have a lot of different types of pass rushers between Max Crosby, Tyree Wilson, who is massive, or Malcolm Kuntz is more of a speed guy. So I'm hoping that we get to see Guyton in extended fashion next Saturday night. Later, let's talk about some other players on the defensive side of the ball that stood out to us. Let's talk about DeMarvion Overshown and Marquise Bell next. This episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go enjoy the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. Get daily insights to the best fantasy draft strategies so that you can win your league this season. I'm already getting ready. I've been putting
Look at that.
Yeah, getting ready, listening to the podcast. Vinny and Michelle do absolutely fantastic work. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Landon, let's talk about a couple other players on defense that stood out to us. I want to start with Marquise Bell because he could have very easily had 2 interceptions this game, was flying around. What did you see from him on tape?
Yeah, I mean, I think Bell really – the question we've had all offseason is exactly what are they going to do with Marquise Bell? Move him back to safety, keep him at linebacker. And then it became very clear early on that they were going to move him back to safety. And we were just wondering exactly – how does that all fit into place? How does Bell returning back to the safety room, which is already very crowded when he left it? How does he fit into this role? Because this is a guy that had earned starter snaps as a linebacker in last season, and obviously they have 2 well-established starting safeties that they like in Wilson and Hooker. So and a third guy that they also like maybe as much as, or if not more than Bell and Thomas. So Bell was a guy that I felt like, had some talent that we weren't exactly sure what his role was going to be. And I think we got a good look at exactly what his role is going to be on Sunday. He was basically, your typical box safety. He was lining up on the second level whenever they were kind of doing middle of the field closed coverages. He certainly, they were doing a lot of kind of safety rotation post snap, which is, again, kind of a staple of Zimmer's defense, it feels like. But it's clear that Bell's time as a linebacker at 218 pounds has given him a master's degree in block avoidance. And that's what we was really on display throughout the tape, is that, he's on that second level and he's able to navigate these angles and avoid blocks and get down and cut down running backs, in trash. He's able to get around a lot of the crap that happens, kind of near the line of scrimmage that safeties sometimes struggle to deal with, because things happen really fast in there and you're undersized and it's hard to kind of avoid. This is something that because Bell spent so much time in these angles at linebacker and played at such a lightweight, he obviously had to spend a whole lot of time learning how to get around and or change your angles in order to kind of get a pursuit angle that will avoid trash and avoid bodies. So that's one area where I feel like it's really translated over into his safety play. When he's down there, when it's a run situation, he's really, really good at, just as good as the linebackers at kind of avoiding contact, finding the most direct path to the ball, and then getting down into it. And then as a pass defender, I think we saw a little bit of just, him is comfortable in these zone drops, even at a deeper rate. He had the interception, which, I went back and watched that play like 4 times. I still don't know who or what
Stetson Bennett was throwing
the ball to, but it almost knocked Marquise Bell over. And then obviously he had the play in the end zone as well, on the tight end. That was
a much better play. He didn't get the interception, but that was actually a much better play by Bell.
For sure. Yeah, he was definitely reading the situation a lot better and was breaking on the ball. And honestly, if it was a little bit better throw like to the tight end, that might have been an interception as well. So just a guy that was clearly all over the place and just was making all the tackles, had his hand on the football a lot. Bell is a guy that I just wasn't sure exactly how he was going to react to this whole situation. It's kind of a demotion for him. So I was interested to see him play again at safety, and he kind of just picked up right where he was. He was an active member of this defense. He was around the football a lot, and it didn't seem to matter that he's playing a different position. It seems like it's still the same old Marquise Bell.
He's a playmaker. And I think the Cowboys just have to find a way to get him on the field because, man, he can fly to the football. He obviously has some ball skills. It's just, how do you get him on the field? Is it in 3 safety looks? Are you taking Donovan Wilson off the field? That's what I'm really curious to see. Once we get into the season is how does Mike Zimmer get Marquise Bell on the field? Because I'm pretty convinced he's one of their best 11 or 12 defensive players.
I mean, it's like you said, every single time he's on the field, he's around the football, he's making plays, he's involved, so the pedigree and all that stuff you can look at, but when you look at the results, again, look at what he did as a 218-pound linebacker last year. It was really impressive. So yeah, I think that if he's taking back to his natural position at safety the way he is, it's going to be hard to justify not putting him on the field a lot, just because
I agree with you.
He's a guy who can make plays in the football and make tackles in the run game, and two-way players like that are pretty rare. So you should find a way to get him on the field.
All right, let's talk about DeMarvion Overshown, who only played, I'm saying only, 11 snaps in this game.
Yeah.
But he made his presence felt, Landon.
He's just, explosive. And it's not even just that he's explosive, but he's smart. That play that I think we all watched where I think it was a screen, right? And the play that I think it was mostly being pointed out for Mozzie's play on it, which was really great too, where Mozzie, engaged the guy, saw that it was a screen, disengaged, and then was able to track back the running back and make the tackle. The reason that Mozzie was able to make that tackle, right, is because Overshown had outside contain on that situation, right? Saw what was happening, had an offensive line that was coming out to try to set up the screen to prevent him from, sealing off the outside. And what does Overshown do? He submarines the offensive lineman. He goes down at his legs and feet, diving, at the feet of the running back. He knows that he's not going to make the tackle, but it doesn't matter, right? He cuts off the pathway for the running back to the outside, forces him back inside, which leads him right back into the waiting arms of Damone Clark and Mozzie Smith. And it's that kind of thing, right? It's you see him, breaking outside to make a tackle for a loss because he's explosive and he saw the play. Those things are all well and good, but it's the little things like understanding your assignment well enough to know, hey, I'm not making this play. I'm just going to dive at the feet to force the ball back inside to make sure somebody else makes the play. It's stuff like that makes me really excited about this kid, because he's explosive, he's smart, he loves football, and it feels like every single time he's on the field, something's there's an energy, there's something's going to happen, right? And that's
why I feel with Bell too. I feel with both these guys. That's why I wanted to talk about them together. Is they provide youth athleticism and playmaking that I'm just not sure the other defensive players have outside of Micah Parsons and Trayvon Diggs and Bland, obviously.
Yeah, Bland, it's funny you mentioned that, because Bland is actually a guy who I was thinking about when I was talking about Bell, right? Because it's Bland was a guy who was a later round draft pick, and they liked him a lot, but he also is just one of those things where he just kept on making plays constantly, training camp, preseason, wherever. And it's they had to put him on the field, right? They eventually just had to, and then eventually he, rose to where he is. Bell and is like that as well, in the sense that it's hard to keep this guy off the field because he keeps doing things every single time he's on the field. Overshown, you knew that was who Overshown was. And obviously the injury kind of really, robbed us of an opportunity to see that. But I think now we're getting an opportunity to kind of see his sort of kineticism, his energy, then his sort of intelligence, that they play smart, they play fast, and they love to play. And I think that's infectious on the defense for a lot of folks.
All right, Layden, let's empty the notebook, run through some other players that stood out to you in the Cowboys' first preseason game. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find as many quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you hire the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In any given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in all of the wrong places. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Every dayers on tomorrow's show, we're going to be answering your Twitter questions. I already had like 15 people send me questions. So clearly people are getting excited about this Cowboys team again, which is fun. So if you have Twitter questions, send them into us. But Landon, let's just run through some other notes and observations you had. And this, I think, is an appropriate time to talk about our guy, Asim Richards. What did you think?
Man, I'm so proud of how this guy's playing. I mean, it's not always perfect with him, but I mean, they're also asking him to do, stuff like he basically spent the entire training camp as a tackle, it felt like, and then now he's starting and kicking inside a guard. And what does he do? He comes out as a starting left guard, and they run back-to-back counter plays to start the game, and he goes out and he gets great angles on his guy, kicks out the block. And they gained 15 yards, I think, or 16 yards on two of the first two carries of the game on two counters, and then just spends the entire rest of the game giving good solid front of the pocket. Just obviously pass protection is something that, because he's playing mostly tackle, that he's been very comfortable with, and operating in a kind of a more confined space leaves him a little bit, less room to have to cover. But, that also exposes some of the issues that he had last year, which was strength. And I think, what we've seen is that he has upgraded his strength since last season. He's still not a bully. I mean, I wouldn't call him, Tyler Smith, but I think as far as where it needs to be, it certainly is there. He still has that same level of athleticism, that kind of really great quick feet that I think is just really important for athletic linemen like that. Whether it was kicking out blocks in a counter, sealing guys off and getting to the second level in wide zone, or just kind of being a solid front for Tre Lance or for Cooper Rush at different points. I thought he had a really good night. It certainly wasn't perfect, but again, through the context of the fact that this is a guy that really hasn't been playing a bunch of guard in training camp, I thought it was very impressive. And you stack that on top of what we've seen from him in training camp. Very impressive training camp so far for Asim Richards.
I think he's going to make it. I think he's going to be a good player in the NFL. Now, we're not predicting that he's going to be a Pro Bowl starter or anything like that, but I do think he can be like a very, very good 6 offensive lineman who, you put into these games and you don't notice a massive drop off, or maybe he continues to develop and he ends up becoming a solid starter. But it does feel like this is somebody who the Cowboys drafted last year on day 3 that's going to turn out to be certainly worth that pick. We'll stay on the interior offensive line. Cooper Beebe played both center and guard. He played more center than he did guard. Yeah. Still pretty good overall day. He played 55 snaps, 40 pass blocking snaps, and only gave up 2 pressures. Both of his pressures came when he was at center. Yeah. But I thought he looked really good.
That was his best game, like his best look at center we've seen so far. Right. Yeah. Like, I think, there wasn't so much of the snap issues that I noticed, and really, like, it feels like, as far as where he needs to go, like in his development, right, it feels like he's kind of gotten past some of the snap stuff, hopefully, or at least that's starting to stabilize a little bit.
This is why preseason is great for him. Like, if he can get 45 to 50 snaps a game, it's just going to help him so much.
Absolutely. And I think that the next step for him is, again, with the other aspect that we talked about, is that transition post snap into becoming a blocker. And I think we saw some great improvements there. We saw, him getting into a comfortable stance. He's not rushing. Like, when it's bad is that he looks like he's rushing, right? He snaps it and it is like moving too quick to try to get into his stance. and it's not natural and he ends up lunging, that's when he runs into problems. When it's good, he snaps it, he comfortably gets in his stance and then engages at an appropriate time, not getting over his skis. So we saw a lot more of that. I thought he had a much better look in this game than what we've seen basically in practice the last few.
Let's run through a couple other players quickly, Landon. Kayvon Carson, I thought he was pretty easily the best corner they had on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Kayvon Carson, really one of the things you get excited, not only obviously about his coverage, he's been a sticky cover guy. He's been at the top of every route with wide receivers. I think the thing that his playmaking is what's going to get him on the field early, but it's his sure tackling that's going to keep him on the field, right? Because I think that's one thing that really, really stood out is he's a physical player. He doesn't mind throwing his body around. He makes tackles. And I think it really, that kind of matters, and especially in light of what we saw with Eric Scott, right? Eric Scott missed that tackle early in the game, and what should have been just a 4 or 5 yard pass protection on a pass play on a slant ended up being like a 22-yard catch and run. So I think Carson had another great game where he was, sticky in coverage. He gave up some passes, but that's going to happen if you're a corner. The key thing there is that, again, very solid at making tackles, even bringing guys down before the first down marker. I think that was really, really a good sign for him. Can I add a guy real quick just to throw someone out? I thought Kemon Hall looked pretty decent. He's a guy that they picked up late in this whole process. We haven't seen a ton of him yet. He's a veteran. I think it's his 4th year. He played with the Rams, if I'm not mistaken. But he played I think some 40-plus snaps at nickel. And right now the Cowboys need to find a backup nickel. They don't really have a guy that's designated for that. So I thought he played mostly fine. So I just thought I'd throw him out because he's a guy that we may need to keep an eye on because he could be your potential backup nickel guy.
Yeah. After watching, I'm just going to add a couple more. After watching all of the receivers, I was pretty disappointed in that group outside of Jalen Brooks, of course. I thought he looked good on his one target. I hope that group gets better because there was just a lot of mental errors. There was drops all over the place. We can talk about
especially. I mean, honestly, I thought he had a bad game.
He had a bad game. Now, Tre Lance did not have a great game, but I think the receivers did not help him out very much.
Oh, I thought they were. No, there were several drops that Tre Lance put the ball right in the money, and they just dropped it right there. I thought that Durden did some decent things, but I also think that as an overall class, you didn't see anything from Tyron Billy Johnson. Obviously, Cropper played poorly. Durden, I think, had a couple of different things, but he just didn't, get an opportunity to shine. Who was the kid, the down roster kid who had a really big game? Harmon.
Kelvin Harmon. He was somebody that a lot of people liked in the 2019 draft. I remember a couple of people having him inside the top 3 receivers. He fell all the way to late day 3 coming out of NC State. Was productive as a rookie and then just kind of faded away. But he's probably the most polished out of all those guys on the back end of the roster. So I'm not surprised to see him have some success.
Yeah. And then, just real quick with Tre Lance, because I know we don't have too much of time, but he's too late. When he gets into trouble, he reverts back to bad footwork. This timing is often late because he just needs to hit that back foot and release it. There's too many times when he's hitting the back foot and he's like holding, and he throws it too late. And it looks inaccurate because he's trying to fit it into a window that shouldn't be that tight, right? He should be throwing the ball when the window is wide open, not as it's closing. But here are the positives about 19, right? Because we don't talk about that enough, right? It's not his athleticism is not just his speed. He's big and strong. He's hard to take down in the pocket.
You saw that on that 4th down play where he should have been sacked, but he rips off a tackle and gets the first down.
That's right. And I think that stuff is very important. It's like you get the opportunity to break out of that and then get a second look at the play, right? A late snap opportunity. He also, his arm talent is top tier. And what does that ultimately mean for guys like that is that it's not even just that he could throw the ball down the field very far, which honestly, downfield passing is where he struggles the most. I think where you see his zip and where it's valuable is in short passing and mid-range passing, because I think the great example is that screen that he threw, right? The fact that he was able to kind of get the ball there so quickly or get the ball into the flat, with some zip on it, it gives the ball carrier an extra moment with the ball so that they can collect themselves and then make a move to try to kind of continue. It's the same idea as having accuracy on a slant that allows the receiver to get yak by being able to snatch it. If you get the ball out quickly to an outlet pass or to a middle range, like someone on a stop route or something, the ball arrives quickly. They suddenly have an extra moment they wouldn't normally have if they have to wait for the football to make a move, secure the ball, and that sort of thing. So those are all positive things. And I think Tre Lance showed a lot of positive things in this game, as well as negative. But I do think that there is something to work with here, and there's something to build with. And I'm excited to see exactly where he goes, in this next game.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen today. Now go listen to the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Get daily insights to the best fantasy draft strategies so that you can win your league this season. You can find the link to the Locked On Fantasy Football show in the description, so you don't even need to go search for it. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for checking out this podcast. Go download the Locked On Cowboys podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. You can follow us on YouTube as well. You can follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.